Congressman Garret Graves. Congressman Graves, with a background dealing with our coast, working heavily with a couple issues we're going to talk about today. So with that, let me welcome in Congressman Graves. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Great to see you.
Good to see you as well. So, Congressman, there's a couple issues I wanted to get into with you today. Number one, some people are starting to see this as they get flood insurance renewals, or maybe if they initiate new policies. But FEMA recently implemented something called Risk Rating 2.0 with the National Flood Insurance Program. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that actually is and why FEMA is doing it?
Yeah, so Risk Rating 2.0, it is an attempt by FEMA to move to what they're calling a risk-based flood insurance premium system. This isn't anything new. This whole idea came up during the Obama administration. They realized the flaws in it and said, look, we're not going to do this. It came up again during the Trump administration. They said the same thing. But now this new administration has moved forward with it. And what's happening is they have begun disconnecting the mapping system for flood risk with the way that they calculate your rates. And I mean, this whole idea seems crazy. So on the one hand, they have a mapping system that says, hey, here are the people that are vulnerable. Here are the areas that are going to flood. Then they use an entirely different calculation to determine what your flood insurance rates are. So, Dr. Steve, what we've seen is in some cases in the lower portions of South Louisiana and in areas like Lafourche and St. Charles, we've seen rates going up from $560, $600, $700 a year up to $7,000, $8,000, and almost $9,000 a year. And so this is pricing people out of being able to live in these communities, forcing your home value to significantly be decreased. And it's all about their effort to try to bring the flood insurance program back into solvency, back into the black. But when you actually go do a deep dive on the program, you realize that its finances really aren't out of whack, and it's largely been a mismanaged program.
Since you bring that up, at last check, I'd seen that the flood insurance program was something like maybe over $20 billion in debt. And if you look at the numbers, they had to borrow $18 billion back in 2005 post-Katrina to pay a bunch of claims here in Louisiana. The New Orleans area, at least we could say, was a man-made disaster. A lot of people agree on that with the levee failures. So how much do we attribute to mismanagement of the program? When you think about that, the program's over $20 billion in debt right now, had to borrow $18 billion back then. And is it unfair that Louisiana is bearing so much burden with the changes to this program?
Well, so I'll answer your first question first on the borrowing and the debt. Yes, Hurricane Katrina, the Corps of Engineers came out. The head of the Corps of Engineers came out and said it was a man-made failure, it was an engineering failure, and it was their fault. Well, look, if this were a private contractor, that private contractor's insurance would be paying for or covering the liability. In this case, just because it's the federal government, that means the taxpayers through higher insurance premiums should be paying it. That's not really fair. The other major contribution to the debt was Hurricane Harvey, where you had rainfall totals, I think, approaching 46 inches. 46 inches of rain in Hurricane Harvey. And sometimes when you have those one-offs, those extraordinary events, you've got to say, you know what, look, this one's so far out of bounds that we can't really consider this being a liability of the flood insurance program. And so I think that some of those really extraordinary events we've got to look at differently. But Dr. Steve, I think we need to be approaching the way that we do this differently. We can't just have a flood insurance program that prices people out of protection over here and have a totally dysfunctional hurricane protection and flood control program and coastal restoration effort over here. We've got to connect these things. Where are their liabilities? Where is there the greatest potential to have rates increase? And let's not go out there and tell these people, sorry, your house is now effectively a loss, your mortgage is upside down. Instead, come in and say, hey, here's where we need to prioritize flood protection investments. Let's make these communities safer to where they don't have these unaffordable rates. So that's the strategy we've been trying to pursue, is connecting the dots on these two disconnected efforts.
One of the biggest criticisms so far of Risk Rating 2.0 is that FEMA has not been very transparent with the model they're using to come up with their rates. Do you know why they're not being transparent, and what do you know in terms of how they're calculating these rates?
So we started watching what they were doing, and in April, well, I think it was back in February is when we first reached out to them, which raising strong concerns. In April, we had a phone call with them. In May, we had a phone call with them. I was talking to the acting administrator, assistant administrator, the head of the flood insurance program. The fourth phone call, they finally said, we're going to have to put you on the phone with our contractor. No one could answer our questions. They couldn't explain to us the very transparency issue that you just brought up. And Dr. Steve, one of the things they said to us over and over again is they said, hey, look, we're never going to see these rates go up to, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 from, again, $500 and $600. And so as soon as we started getting some of these rates coming into us, we went to it, we said, hey, we're seeing exactly what you said was not going to happen, was impossible. And they said, oh, this isn't right, only to come back to us and confirm, oh, actually, these are right. So they don't even have any idea what it is that they're pushing. They can't explain it. There was a group called First Street Foundation that did an analysis of these new rates, found that the state of Louisiana was the only state in the country that was being overcharged under this new system. I mean, the whole thing is fatally flawed. The reason that you keep it black box, the reason that you don't share data and information is because it is not defendable. And that's what's going on right now. I have offered amendments over and over again, trying to block this from being implemented, trying to allow flood insurance policyholders to choose between the old rate system or the new rate system. This thing is not ready for prime time, and the fact that both the Obama and the Trump administration did not implement this speaks pretty loudly to suggest that this whole idea is just foundationally or fundamentally flawed and is not ready for prime time.
So you talk about Louisiana potentially being overcharged here, and we're not a very big state population-wise, but it's something like 1 in 10 national flood insurance policies are right here in Louisiana. And the Advocate, the Times-Picayune, they published an article not too long ago. They said something, they had done an analysis, and they found something on the order of 1 in 10 people might see increases greater than 400% on their policies. What is that going to do to people? You kind of hit on that a little bit. And I guess part B is, have you heard of any of those sorts of increases happening closer to Metro Baton Rouge, or is a little more of that more focused farther south and closer to New Orleans?
Yeah, so second question first, on we have seen some of these exponential or multiple times rate increases much closer to the capital region, policies in Baton Rouge, policies in Livingston Parish, some areas of lower ascension as well. We've seen some of these rate increases. But look, these are people that reach out to us, that share their data with us. And so that's how we're finding out about it, because FEMA is not transparent, will not otherwise share data with us. So that's a major issue, and it is a problem. In regard to the fact that Louisiana has some of the highest percentages of policies in the nation, something you have to keep in mind, and it's something FEMA just continues to ignore. Look, we're at the bottom of one of the largest watersheds in the world. In our region, in the capital region, we drain the state of Montana, we drain the state of New York, and we drain parts of Canada. And so this is, again, one of the largest watersheds in the world. It all comes funneling down to us. And so are we at greater risk? Yeah, you can absolutely make that argument. We've seen record water levels in the Mississippi River in the last 10 years, more than we've ever seen before. But it's not because of water we're putting into the river. How do you charge us for things we don't have control over? How do you charge us for water from Nebraska, Iowa, again, New York, Montana, and Canada? You can't do that. Secondly, with the erosion of our coast, look, the Corps of Engineers did an incredibly successful flood protection project, and that they were able, and navigation project, to keep the Mississippi River between the levees, to have deep draft navigation, to no longer have this delta switching or river changing course. But it also caused one of the greatest environmental disasters in our nation's history, and that's the loss of 2,000 square miles of our coast, making the very goal of flood protection in jeopardy, because now you've got erosion on the backside of the levees, making us more susceptible. So we've got challenges from the north with all the river water. We've got challenges from the south with all the coastal erosion, both of which are really caused by the federal government, yet they're trying to charge us in Louisiana for it. That's just not fair. It's not just, and risk rating 2.0 fails to take that into consideration.
Let me ask you this. Do we have any idea, there's starting to, some private flood insurance options are starting to pop up. Is privatizing the flood insurance program, is that the route to go? Or do you think it would just become too expensive for many of us here in South Louisiana if it went that route?
So it depends on how you do it. Generally, and you know this, I mean, generally, is the private sector more efficient than the federal government? Absolutely. The problem with implementing a private system is this. If you're a private insurance company and you're looking at insurance policies, what you're going to probably do is go cherry pick the low risk and the medium risk policies, leaving the higher risk policies alone. The reason insurance works is because you have a diversity of risk in your portfolio. You have the high risk and the low risk, and they help offset one another. By allowing for the private sector to really open it up and allow them to step into this area, they're probably going to cherry pick, again, the low and the moderate risk policies, leaving all the high risk policies, which means a lot of people in South Louisiana. That eliminates your diversity of risk, which means that the rates in Louisiana would go up even more than we're seeing right now. So if you did an aggressive private sector insurance, flood insurance, which look, the market already exists today to some degree, you've got to make sure that they don't come cherry pick, that you ensure they have diversity of risk in their portfolio. Otherwise, Louisiana, you think rates are high now, just wait, they're going to get significantly.
Okay, so risk rating 2.0, that's one concern headed into hurricane season here in South Louisiana. Another is that we're entering another hurricane season without the Comite diversion project completed. In March 2021, the announcement was made that it looked like we were on track to have it completed by the end of 2022. Recently, we heard about more delays. Congressman, this was a project that was originally conceived after the 1983 flood, as you know, right? And then taxpayers started paying on it in the year 2000, 2001, something like that. More than 20 years now. How is it that more than 20 years later, we're still waiting on this project?
Well, look, there's a good news here, and I want to start with that. Look, the good news is that this project, as you just said, has been stuck since like 1982, 83, and made very little progress. When I started this job in 2015, in the first month we were in office, we got more money than I think it was like 6 times more money that had been appropriated over the previous 7 years, and we did that in 1 month. And so, in 2016, before the flood, we got another chunk of money for this project. In fact, I sent a letter to the governor explaining that if the state didn't put up a match, we were going to lose some of the significant federal funds. And then we were able to get all of the remaining funds for this project appropriated, which at the time was $392 million. We were able to cobble together those funding sources, which was everything that the Corps of Engineers said was needed. And I want to remind you that this project, actually when it was authorized by Congress, they said it was going to cost $183 million. $183 million. We ended up getting $392 million. Project's moving forward, and they told us it was going to be finished by December of 2021. And I've never seen the Corps of Engineers hit a deadline that they set themselves, but in any case, we said, look, we've given you all the money. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt and be optimistic here. Because normally they get money that kind of trickles in. Not only, and look, I've built these projects much of my life. I was watching their progress, and I told them well ahead of March of 2021, you are not on track to finish this project on time. You're going to exceed costs, you're going to exceed your timeline. And they kept telling me I was wrong, Finally, I sent them a letter, and I said, I want you to respond in writing. They wrote back and said, okay, we're going to be a year late. It's going to be December 2022, which was a 50% increase in their timeline, in their schedule. Then to have them come back to me and say, all right, and it's not $392 million. We now are $125 million short, which, look, money didn't grow on trees. It is very, very difficult to get that kind of money appropriated for a single project especially after we had gotten such a huge sum just a few years before. Despite all those challenges, we were able to secure an additional $128 million for this project, only to have them come back and tell us, okay, now we're not on trajectory for 2022 December, but probably 2023 December or even later. It is infuriating. It is absolutely infuriating to watch this. Look, we broke through the administrative hurdles, the environmental problems that this project had. We broke through the funding issues, got all those things done. Those were the things that stopped this project historically. We got them all done. And now you've got major problems that the state, in my opinion, is mishandling, and the Corps of Engineers mishandling regarding real estate, this gas pipeline. There were issues with the railroad that we helped broker the deal on. But this is just awful what's going on. And let me circle back with some good news, Dr. Steve. There is a little bit of other good news, and that is that the way that this project's being done, you don't have to have the whole thing built before you're going to start seeing flood protection benefits. So there are other things that are going on, other components of this project where you will see incremental progress. And lastly, there are actually other complementary investments that we're making in the capital region to the tune, when you start adding it all up, we're probably approaching $1 billion of new investment in flood protection in our region that's going to help to really improve flood protection and make our community safer.
I know you're busy in the nation's capital. Just want to ask one or two more questions before we let you go. So there certainly has been some improvement on this Comite diversion project, even with the latest news of more delays. One of my concerns personally is that maybe some people see this as a silver bullet for flooding across parts of the Comite and Amite basins, and maybe overestimating the impact. There was a study in 2016, or somebody with the Amite River Basin Commission, I think, said with the 2016 flood, had the canal been there, maybe 20 to 25% of the homes that had flooded wouldn't have flooded. But you're still looking at 75% that would have. Do you have concerns about that people might overestimate the impact of this canal?
Look, first, this project is a really important project, and just from a plumbing perspective, what this does is people believe that we all drain in the Mississippi River in our region. We really don't. We largely drain into Lake Maurepas, Lake Pontchartrain, then into Lake Borgne in the Gulf of Mexico. So you have the Comite River that kind of flows northwest down to southeast. You have the Amite River that largely flows northeast to southwest, and then they come together, and the confluence is just over on the west side of Denham Springs, and then it continues down as the Amite River. What this project does is it builds a 12-mile canal running from the Comite River over to the west of the Mississippi. It takes large volumes of water out of the Comite River and ultimately the Amite and sends it over to the Mississippi River, where you have excess capacity during high rainfall periods in our region. So this is a game changer in terms of relieving some of these huge flows on the Comite and Amite River. In some cases, Dr. Steve, as you know, this will bring down water levels as much as 6 feet in some communities. In other areas, you're exactly right, it may just be a few inches. But as we learned in the 2016 flood, and you know better than I do, every storm is not the same. It depends on where the storm goes. And a storm that comes in north of Baton Rouge, this will be a game changer type project. For storms that come in south of Baton Rouge, this is not going to have that big of an impact. That's why it's important. And I mentioned that this is one project in a larger portfolio of an estimated $1 billion in new flood protection investments in our region, everything from what we refer to as the Five Bayous Project, $250 million, the Highway 22 project, another $50 million. We gave $112 million to East Baton Rouge Parish for flood mitigation projects, $68 million to Livingston Parish for flood mitigation projects, another $65 million in Livingston Parish they've cleaned out nearly 400 miles, clearing and snagging rivers, ditches, canals, bayous. This is all part of a portfolio of projects designed to address our flooding problems. And one of them I didn't bring up is that whole Alligator Bayou, Bayou Paul area over at Iberville Ascension and East Baton Rouge parishes that have flooded down there kind of south of U Club, St. Gabriel area. We've got to address that as well. And we've got solutions moving forward there on Bayou Mancheck as we speak. So look, really important. You're exactly right that you can't prepare for the last storm. You've got to be thinking about all of these different scenarios. And I think this $1 billion of new investment, it takes us a major step in the right direction and is going to ultimately make our community safer and lower flood insurance rates.
I think that's a key point. No two storms are alike. Everyone is different. All right, so hurricane season, the start is a couple of days away. Any last words for people here in South Louisiana watching as another season approaches, coming off of 2 record-setting seasons here in Louisiana?
Look, South Louisiana is one of the greatest places in the nation to live. But along with all those great things that we love about our community, there are some challenges, and hurricanes and major storms is one of them. The best thing in the world that we can do is make sure that you have a good strategy. The state's got the website, getagameplan.org. I think it's really important that you be safe. I talked to more people after Hurricane Ida, more people in my entire life that said that they regretted staying. And trying to ride out that storm. And so I think it's really good advice that the best thing we can do is to be safe, to take our families and go places that are safe and make sure that you have a strategy to do that and don't get caught flat-footed as we saw with many folks in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
We hear that so often about regretting staying after the storm. Congressman Garret Graves joined us from Washington, D.C., where he's busy at work. Thank you so much for the time that you've given us this morning.
You bet, Dr. Steve. Thank you.